Understanding Trump by Newt Gingrich. The soldier is President Trump.
I'm back. And people see that. Maybe you can go down to the bike today. The bike is available. And he said, yeah, let's go to the bike.
I'm mine.
Yeah, because you
I'm
don't
mine.
Huh?
I'm mine.
You might? Yeah, let's go downstairs. It's available. Nobody's down it, so. You gotta get your legs stronger. And you gotta put your shoes on, my dear.
When President Trump was selecting his cabinet, he was especially glad to get Generals Mattis and Kelly. He was in awe of Mattis as a real fighter who insisted on winning. He loved Mattis's phrase that the Marines could be your best friends or your worst enemies, and you get to choose. President Trump felt he had really accomplished something when General Mattis said yes. Similarly, the then president-elect revered the sacrifice General Kelly had made in losing his son in Afghanistan in 2010. He felt that Kelly would be bringing competence, a dignity, and a sense of honor that Trump really valued. It is from this sense of respect for those who risk their lives to defend America that Trump approaches rebuilding and strengthening our military. Chapter 10, The Safety Box. President Trump's first and most important job is to be the commander-in-chief of our military, and the primary role of the federal government is to keep Americans safe from all threats, foreign and domestic. The founders framed our nation this way because there is no effective freedom without safety. There is no ability to pursue happiness without safety. The poor are especially vulnerable and likely to be exploited when there is no safety. So, it is only logical that safety is the first box in the four-box policy model President Trump should adopt. After years of President Trump's predecessor refusing to enforce immigration law, failing to properly support law enforcement in the face of open, visible lawlessness, allowing long-time alliances abroad to wither, and allowing investment in our military to degrade, Trump has his work cut out for him. Safety at home. Restoring the rule of law within our borders is critical to making Americans safe at home. Most Americans understand this, and that's why President Trump's pledge to be a law and order candidate resonates. Meanwhile, the elite were completely befuddled by Trump's pledge. The reason for the disparity in perception is simple. After reaching a peak in 1991, crime rates had fallen in the United States through 2014. This trend of falling crime rates was considered such a well-established fact by the elites that nothing could shake them off it. They were blind to two realities that were obvious to normal Americans who were watching the news and in tune with their communities. First, violent crime was beginning to tick back up again. FBI statistics released in September 2016 show the violent crime increase of 3.9% in 2015 compared with the previous year. Preliminary FBI data from the first half of 2016 show that violent crime again increased in all categories compared with the first half of 2015. Notably, it increased the least in the Northeast, which may have added to the elites' lack of awareness. The elites were so stuck in the conventional wisdom that they couldn't process this new reality. Remember in Chapter 2 when we talked about the four-sided table of Trump and that one of those sides was anti-political correctness? We reviewed how political correctness can also mean adhering to the conventional wisdom. Trump's ability to recognize that violent crime was on the rise before anyone else is a great example of that. Second, Trump understood the power of television and knew how disturbing the violent protests related to police shootings across the country were to normal Americans. He watched in horror as 5 police officers were gunned down by a sniper in Dallas, and he was aghast at news reports of radical Islamic terror attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando. He also understood that the huge spikes in shootings in Chicago, St. Louis, and Baltimore were earning major media attention and making Americans nervous. These two dynamics are why Americans' concern for crime and violence has risen to a 15-year high, according to the results of the Gallup poll published in April 2016. The pollster reported that 53% of adults in 2016 asked say they worry a great deal about violence and crime in the United States, while 26% of adults say they worry a fair amount, making a total of 79% of concerned adults. 79% of concerned adults. The elites were stuck on outdated conventional wisdom while Trump saw Americans being killed, families being devastated, and our country falling apart. President Trump quickly repudiated the "nothing to see here" elites and sided with the large group of Americans who rightly believed their country was becoming less safe and more insecure. It's no surprise that the more people are anxious about becoming the victims of violence after you consider the recent rise of open, visible, violent rebellions against law enforcement in this country. The public has always questioned police officers who use lethal force in the line of duty, and this should not change. But the culture surrounding how police are held accountable has taken a violent turn toward mob rule. In 2014, protests erupted in Ferguson, Missouri, after an officer shot and killed Michael Brown. These demonstrations lasted for weeks, eventually turning into a full-scale riot. People set fire to cars and buildings, looted stores, and attacked police. The violence continued even after the state's governor called in the Missouri National Guard. Nearly a year later, after a grand jury decided not to indict the officer involved in the shooting, deciding that Brown had never surrendered to police and had tried to take the officer's weapon, the rioting erupted again. More buildings were burned and more stores looted. In April 2015, after days of peaceful demonstrations in Baltimore, Maryland, over the death of Freddie Gray while he was in police custody, some protesters turned to rioting. After Gray's funeral, the BBC reported that afternoon and evening, motors tore through parts of Baltimore, leaving a path of debris. Burnt or smashed cars and looted storefronts. The riots lasted for days and left Baltimore looking like a war zone. Securing the border. President Trump has already taken the first steps towards fixing our immigration system by strengthening security at our borders. During his first week in office, during his first term, mind you, President Trump signed executive orders to hire up to 10,000 more U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers and up to 5,000 more U.S. Border Patrol agents. This was a perfectly reasonable action to take and long overdue. Heroin and opiate abuse are devastating communities across the nation. The Drug Enforcement Administration told Reuters in July 2013 that large-scale opium poppy farms, the plant from which heroin is made, are very rare in the United States. So most of the heroin is coming from outside our borders. Evidently, Trump is a wise man who knows what he's doing. So,